The massive vessel appeared without warning, materializing just beyond lunar orbit in a burst of exotic radiation that temporarily blinded every telescope pointed at that sector of space. Dr. Maya Patel stood frozen before the wall of monitors at the Arecibo Observatory, her coffee cup slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the floor. The object was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a crystalline structure that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry, stretching nearly 20 kilometers from end to end. "Are you seeing this?" her colleague Dr. Marcus Chen whispered, frantically typing commands into his terminal. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever this thing is, it's putting out more power than our entire civilization combined." Before Maya could respond, every screen in the observatory flickered and went dark. When they came back online seconds later, they displayed a single message in pristine English. "We are the Nexus. Your species has been observed and found wanting. You have 30 Earth days to prove your worth, or we shall begin immediate resource extraction. Your planet will be harvested. Resistance is inadvisable." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings, military mobilizations, and global panic. Maya found herself quickly drafted into a hastily assembled think tank of Earth's brightest minds, tasked with understanding and responding to the Nexus threat. The UN Security Council chamber in New York became their war room, though what kind of war they were fighting remained unclear. "Their technological superiority is absolute," General Sarah Hayes declared, gesturing at the holographic display showing the Nexus vessel. "Our most advanced weapons wouldn't even scratch their hull. We need options that don't involve direct confrontation." Maya stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "The message mentioned proving our worth. We need to understand what they consider valuable. Their ship's design suggests a civilization that has transcended traditional physical limitations. They may not be interested in our resources at all. That could be misdirection." "Or a test," interrupted Dr. James Wilson, a quantum physicist from MIT. "Look at how they delivered their message. Perfect English, broadcast simultaneously to every digital display on Earth. They didn't need to communicate that way. They wanted to demonstrate their power while using terms we'd understand. They're showing off." The revelation hit Maya like a thunderbolt. They're not just showing off. They're being theatrical. Everything about this is designed to provoke a specific response. The 30-day deadline, the threat of harvesting our planet, the overwhelming display of technology. They're creating a scenario. Before she could elaborate, alarms blared throughout the building. The Nexus ship had launched what appeared to be thousands of smaller crystalline objects. They streaked through Earth's atmosphere, ignoring all attempts to intercept them, before burying themselves deep in the planet's crust at seemingly random locations across the globe. Within hours, the devices activated. Massive energy fields sprang up around major cities, cutting them off from the outside world. Inside these barriers, time itself seemed to flow differently. Those trapped inside reported experiencing days, while only hours passed outside. Communications remained possible, but physical passage through the fields proved impossible. "They're not waiting 30 days, General Hayes growled. "This is already an invasion." But Maya saw a pattern in the chaos. The energy fields weren't random. They created distinct zones of altered time across the planet. More importantly, they seemed to be affecting human consciousness in subtle ways. Reports flooded in of people experiencing strange dreams, enhanced cognitive abilities, and most intriguingly, a growing sense of collective purpose. "These aren't just containment fields," Maya announced to the increasingly desperate council. "They're observation chambers. The Nexus isn't preparing to harvest our resources. They're studying how we react under pressure, how we adapt, how we think." Dr. Wilson's eyes widened as he examined the latest data. The energy signatures, they're not just creating barriers. They're measuring something, reading something we can't even detect. Maya felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces began falling into place. They're not testing our worth in terms of technology or resources. They're testing our potential, our capacity for growth under pressure. And I think, she paused, hardly believing what she was about to suggest, I think we might be surprising them. As if in response to her words, new messages appeared on screens worldwide. Initial results promising. Acceleration protocols commencing. Prepare yourselves. The crystalline devices pulsed with blinding light, and the real test began. Maya hadn't slept in 48 hours, but the data streaming across her screens demanded attention. Inside the Nexus containment fields, something extraordinary was happening to the human mind. The temporal distortions weren't just affecting the passage of time. They were catalyzing changes in human consciousness itself. Look at these brainwave patterns, she urged Dr. Wilson, who had been working alongside her in the hastily assembled research bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Every person inside the fields is showing increased neural plasticity. Their minds are adapting to the temporal distortions, but it's more than that. They're beginning to perceive reality differently. Wilson adjusted his glasses, frowning at the readings. It's like their brains are being upgraded, but not in any way the Nexus could have predicted. These patterns, they're chaotic, completely unpredictable, yet somehow coherent. Reports from inside the contained cities painted an increasingly strange picture. People were developing what could only be described as new senses. Some could perceive the flow of time itself, seeing echoes of past and future events. Others reported an ability to intuitively understand complex systems, from quantum mechanics to global weather patterns. But most importantly, they were beginning to perceive the Nexus technology itself in ways that should have been impossible. General Hayes burst into the lab, her usually stoic demeanor showing cracks of excitement. We've just received confirmation from 12 different containment zones. Our people are starting to see through their tech. Not metaphorically, they're actually perceiving the underlying structure of the Nexus systems. Maya's hands flew across her keyboard, pulling up the latest data. It's not just observation. Look at these readings from Singapore. A group of children were playing near one of the barrier generators. They weren't trying to break through it or study it. They were just playing. But their game somehow caused fluctuations in the field strength. Children, Wilson asked, incredulous. Why would they affect the fields more than our scientists? Because they're not trying to understand it logically, Maya replied, the pieces finally clicking into place. The Nexus technology operates on principles beyond our current science, but our minds, especially young, adaptable minds, are naturally evolving to interface with it, not through technology or rational analysis, but through intuition and creativity. The revelation sparked a flurry of activity across the globe. Inside the containment zones, people began organizing themselves into groups, not based on scientific expertise or military training, but on their newfound abilities to perceive and interact with the Nexus systems. Artists worked alongside quantum physicists. Children collaborated with engineers, and slowly, a new understanding began to emerge. The Nexus isn't just testing us, Maya announced during an emergency UN broadcast. They're trying to force our evolution, to reshape us into something they can understand and predict. But human consciousness doesn't work that way. We're not evolving according to their plan. We're adapting in ways they never imagined possible. The evidence was mounting. Each containment field was supposed to isolate and study its human subjects, but instead, people were forming unprecedented psychological connections. The barriers meant to contain humanity were becoming conduits for a new kind of collective consciousness, one that retained individual creativity while allowing for deep, intuitive collaboration. Dr. Wilson's team made another crucial discovery. The temporal distortions weren't just affecting human minds. They were being affected by human minds in return. The more people learned to perceive the Nexus technology, the more that technology began to exhibit unexpected behaviors. It's like a feedback loop, Wilson explained to the Joint Chiefs. Their technology is based on rigid principles, perfect crystalline structures. But human consciousness is fluid, creative, inherently chaotic. When we interact with their systems, we introduce an element of uncertainty they can't predict or control. Maya noticed something else in the data, a pattern so subtle it had nearly escaped detection. The Nexus wasn't just observing humanity's response to their tests. They were showing signs of confusion, even concern. Their perfect crystalline ship had begun exhibiting microscopic imperfections, tiny fractures in its otherwise flawless geometry. They thought they were studying us, Maya told her colleagues, but I don't think they understood what they were getting into. Human consciousness isn't just adapting to their technology, it's changing it. We're not just subjects in their experiment anymore. We've become an active variable they can't control. The implications were staggering. Humanity's greatest weakness, its unpredictable, often irrational nature, had become its greatest strength. The very chaos and creativity that the Nexus had deemed primitive was proving to be the key to understanding and potentially surpassing their technology. As the 20th day of the crisis dawned, Maya received an urgent message from a containment zone in Brazil. A 6-year-old girl had done more than just perceive the Nexus field. She had begun to play with it, reshaping it as easily as building with blocks. And the Nexus, for the first time since their arrival, showed signs of genuine alarm. The time had come to turn humanity's hidden advantage into an active defense. But first, they would need to understand exactly what that little girl had discovered, and hope the Nexus didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The Brazilian containment zone had become the center of humanity's resistance, though not in any way military strategists could have predicted. The facility housing 6-year-old Sofia Santos looked more like a kindergarten than a research center, its walls covered in colorful drawings that somehow matched the quantum patterns of Nexus technology. Maya watched through reinforced glass as Sofia sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by other children who had shown similar abilities. Their hands moved through the air, manipulating invisible forces that Maya's instruments could barely detect. The Nexus barrier above their heads rippled like water, responding to their gestures in ways that defied physical laws. She doesn't think of it as alien technology at all. Dr. Elena Santos, Sofia's mother and a quantum physicist, explained. To her, it's just another way to play. She says the lights want to dance with her. General Hayes, who had flown in personally to observe, shook her head in amazement. And she can actually modify the field structure. More than that, Maya replied, pulling up a holographic display. She and the other children aren't just modifying it. They're teaching it new patterns. Look at these readings. The crystalline structure of Nexus tech is based on perfect mathematical symmetry. But when the children interact with it, they introduce elements of organic chaos, like teaching a computer to dream. The implications had sparked a radical plan. Instead of trying to fight the Nexus directly, they would use their own testing protocol against them. The children's ability to play with the barriers had proven that human consciousness could affect Nexus technology. Now they needed to scale up that effect dramatically. Operation Breakthrough began at midnight. In containment zones across the globe, people gathered in massive groups, following the techniques developed by Sofia and the other children. Artists, musicians, and dancers performed while scientists measured the quantum fluctuations their creative energy generated. Meditation groups formed enormous circles, their combined mental activity creating ripples in the temporal fields. Maya coordinated from the Brazilian command center, watching as data poured in from around the world. "It's working," she announced, her voice tense with excitement. "The barriers are becoming more permeable. Not enough to break through yet, but they're changing." The Nexus responded almost immediately. The massive crystalline ship began to pulse with new patterns of energy, attempting to reinforce its control over the containment fields. But humanity's chaotic creativity had already begun to infect their systems like a virus. "They're trying to adapt," Dr. Wilson observed, studying the ship's reactions. "But they can only think in terms of perfect patterns. Every time they attempt to counter what we're doing, they have to create new symmetries. And each new pattern becomes vulnerable to human intuition in ways they can't predict." Sophia walked up to the observation window, pressing her small hand against the glass. "The lights are scared," she said simply. "They've never played with anyone before. They only know how to build perfect things." Maya knelt beside her. "Can you show them how to play, Sophia? Can you help them understand?" The girl nodded solemnly. She turned to the other children, speaking in the direct way only kids can manage. "We need to show them the messy drawings, the ones that don't match but still look pretty." What followed defied conventional description. Throughout the containment zones, people began creating art of all kinds: music, dance, paintings, poetry. But they weren't just making art. They were weaving it directly into the quantum fabric of the nexus fields. Every creative act sent ripples through the alien technology, introducing elements of chaos and beauty that its perfect symmetry couldn't reject without collapsing entirely. The massive ship above Earth began to show visible changes. Its crystalline surface, once flawlessly geometric, now rippled with iridescent patterns that resembled abstract paintings. Parts of its structure began to flow like liquid metal, forming shapes that seemed inspired by natural growth rather than mathematical precision. "They're trying to maintain control," Maya observed, "but they're being forced to adapt to our way of thinking. Every attempt to restore perfect order just creates new opportunities for creative chaos." The breakthrough came during hour 15 of the operation. Sophia and her growing group of young players had been working with the barriers continuously, treating the quantum fields like finger paints or building blocks. Suddenly, the little girl stepped back from her latest creation, a swirling pattern that somehow existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. "Look," she said, pointing upward. "They're learning." The Nexus ship had stopped trying to reinforce its barriers. Instead, it began generating new patterns that mimicked the children's creative chaos. The containment fields flickered with colors that had never existed before, forming shapes that seemed to bridge the gap between mathematical precision and artistic expression. "This is it," Maya breathed, watching the readings spike across her instruments. "They're not just adapting, they're transforming. Their entire system is evolving to accommodate human creativity." But even as humanity's plan appeared to be working, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The ship's energy output was increasing exponentially, far beyond anything they had previously recorded. Either they had pushed the Nexus too far, too fast, or something entirely unexpected was about to happen. Sophia looked up at the swirling chaos above them, her expression serene despite the mounting tension. "Don't worry," she said to no one in particular. "They just need to learn how to play properly. Everyone does." The Nexus ship's transformation had exceeded all predictions. Its once rigid crystalline structure now flowed like liquid starlight, creating patterns that simultaneously obeyed perfect mathematical laws while expressing what could only be described as artistic intention. The containment fields around Earth's cities had begun to pulse in sync with the collective emotional states of the humans within them. Maya hadn't left the command center in days, surviving on coffee and the electric tension in the air. The data streaming across her screens told a story that seemed impossible. The Nexus wasn't just changing its approach, it was evolving an entirely new way of existing. "Look at these energy signatures," Dr. Wilson said, pointing to a complex series of waveforms. "They're beginning to mirror human brainwave patterns, but at a quantum level. It's like they're developing their own version of consciousness." General Hayes frowned at the display. "Is that good news or bad news for us?" Before anyone could answer, Sophia tugged at Maya's sleeve. The little girl had become their most important advisor, her innocent understanding of the Nexus technology surpassing their most sophisticated analysis. "They're waking up," she said simply. "They've been asleep for a very long time." The screen suddenly flickered, and a new message appeared. But unlike the cold, precise text of their first contact, these words seemed to flow and shift, as if struggling to contain deeper meanings. "We'd miscalculated. You were not meant to change us. We were meant to perfect you. But perfection, we now understand, is stagnation. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. They're not just communicating. They're expressing uncertainty, doubt, emotions they've never had before. The transformation accelerated. The containment fields began to shift in new ways, no longer acting as barriers but becoming interfaces, allowing humans to perceive and interact with dimensions of reality previously hidden from them. People reported seeing the quantum fabric of space itself, understanding complex universal principles through pure intuition. But with this expanded awareness came a startling revelation. Through the new interfaces, humanity began to perceive the true nature of the Nexus civilization, and it was far from what they had imagined. They're ancient, Maya breathed, interpreting the flood of new data. Not just thousands or millions of years old, they've existed for billions of years. They achieved perfect technological mastery, perfect predictability, perfect order, and it nearly destroyed them. Dr. Wilson nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the swirling patterns above. They became living crystal, veins of pure logic and mathematics. They thought it was evolution, but it was really a kind of stasis. They lost the ability to grow, to create, to imagine new possibilities. That's why they came to Earth, General Hayes realized. Not to test us or harvest our resources, but because they detected something in human consciousness that they had lost. Chaos, creativity, the ability to make intuitive leaps that defy pure logic. Sophia, who had been quietly drawing complex patterns in the air that rippled through multiple dimensions, spoke up. They forgot how to play. They forgot how to make mistakes. They forgot how to be surprised. The Nexus ship suddenly released a pulse of energy, unlike anything they had detected before. But instead of the precise, controlled emissions they had come to expect, this was wild, almost organic in nature. The containment fields around Earth shimmered and transformed, becoming windows into the Nexus consciousness itself. Through these windows, humanity witnessed the impossible. The Nexus beings were learning to dream again. Their perfectly ordered minds were experiencing chaos, uncertainty, and creativity for the first time in eons. The process was dangerous, threatening the very foundations of their crystalline existence, but they seemed unable or unwilling to stop it. This isn't just first contact anymore, Maya said, watching as new patterns of light danced across the sky. This is first awakening. We're not just teaching them how to interface with human consciousness, we're reminding them how to be alive. But the transformation was proving catastrophic for some aspects of Nexus technology. Their ship, designed to maintain perfect mathematical harmony, was struggling to adapt to its new organic patterns. Sections of it began to fracture and dissolve, unable to maintain coherence as chaos and creativity rewrote its fundamental structure. "They're dying," Sophia said suddenly, her voice filled with concern. "The old way is dying, but they don't know how to be new yet. They need help." General Hayes turned to Maya, her expression grave. "How do we help the civilization of crystal beings learn to be organic again? This isn't something we planned for." Maya watched as Sophia continued to draw in the air, her patterns somehow stabilizing the shifting quantum fields around them. "Maybe we don't need a plan," she said slowly. "Maybe what they need isn't our science or our technology. Maybe they just need our humanity." The next few hours would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of one of the oldest civilizations in the universe. As the Nexus struggled through its metamorphosis, Earth's greatest weapons would not be its missiles or bombs, but its artists, dreamers, and children, those who remembered how to create something new from the ashes of the old. The massive Nexus vessel hung in Earth's orbit like a shattered crystal garden, its structure continuously dissolving and reforming in patterns that merged mathematical precision with organic chaos. The transformation had reached a critical point. The ancient civilization's rigid perfection was crumbling, but something new and unprecedented was struggling to be born. Maya stood in the center of what had once been the Brazilian command center, now transformed into something between a kindergarten art room and a quantum physics laboratory. Children's drawings covered the walls, their seemingly random patterns actually representing complex dimensional equations. Sophia sat in the middle of a circle of both scientists and artists, all working together to help guide the Nexus through their metamorphosis. "It's like teaching someone to swim," Sophia explained, her small hands weaving light patterns that rippled through multiple dimensions. "They're scared of drowning in chaos, but they have to trust that something will hold them up." The screens around them flickered with new messages from the Nexus, each one more organic and emotionally complex than the last. "We remember now. Before the crystal. Before the mathematics. We were dreamers once, like you. We thought perfection would save us from uncertainty. Instead, it trapped us in amber for billions of years." Dr. Wilson studied the readings from their quantum sensors. "The transformation is accelerating. Their entire civilization is reimagining itself, using human consciousness as a template. But the process is incredibly dangerous. If they lose coherence completely, their whole society could collapse." General Hayes, who had been coordinating with other containment zones worldwide, looked up from her displays. "We're seeing similar patterns everywhere. The barriers aren't just dissolving. They're becoming something else. Some kind of interface between human intuition and quantum reality." Maya watched as Sophia guided a group of children in what looked like a complex game of multidimensional hopscotch. Each jump and laugh sent ripples through the quantum field, helping stabilize the Nexus's transformation. "They're not just learning from us," she realized. "We're learning from them too. Human consciousness is evolving to understand reality in ways we never could before." The evidence was impossible to ignore. Around the world, people were developing new abilities, not supernatural powers, but an enhanced capacity to perceive and interact with the quantum fabric of reality. Artists could literally paint with probability waves. Musicians composed songs that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Children played games that accidentally solved complex physics equations. Suddenly, the Nexus ship pulsed with blinding light. When the glare faded, its structure had changed completely. Instead of crystal geometry or chaotic organic forms, it had become something entirely new. A living work of art that somehow merged the best aspects of both civilizations. A new message appeared, but this time it wasn't text. Instead, it was a direct transmission of thought and emotion that everyone on Earth could somehow understand. "We offer you a choice. Not a test or an ultimatum, but a genuine choice. We have learned to dream again. We have remembered how to create and grow. But we cannot return to what we were, nor would we wish to. Instead, we propose a partnership." Maya felt Sophia's small hand slip into hers as the message continued. Humanity's gift is not just chaos or creativity. It is the ability to dance between order and disorder, to find patterns in randomness, and introduce wildness into structure. We offer to share with you all our knowledge, all our technology, everything we have learned in billions of years of existence. In return, we ask you to help us remember how to dance. The offer sparked intense debate among Earth's leaders, but the decision had already been made in 1,000 small moments. In children's games that reshaped quantum fields, in artists' visions that crossed dimensional boundaries, in the simple human ability to imagine something new and make it real. 1 month after the Nexus first appeared in Earth's orbit, the containment fields disappeared completely. In their place arose something new. Centers of collaboration where humans and Nexus beings worked together, learning from each other, creating technologies and art forms that neither civilization could have developed alone. The Nexus ship, now a living symbol of transformation, became a bridge between stars, its new organic crystalline technology capable of linking distant points in space through the power of shared consciousness and imagination. Other Nexus vessels began arriving, not as invaders but as students and teachers, each one ready to learn the art of imperfection from humanity. Maya found Sophia in her favorite spot in the new Quantum Art Center, teaching a group of floating light beings, former Nexus entities who had chosen more organic forms, how to draw with crayons. The girl looked up at her and smiled. "See," Sophia said, holding up a drawing that somehow existed in 5 dimensions at once. "Everyone can learn to play, even grown-ups who forgot how." Maya nodded, watching as human children and ancient cosmic beings collaborated on art that defied the boundaries between science and imagination. The Nexus had come to Earth seeking to test humanity's worth, only to discover that worth wasn't something that could be measured or quantified. It could only be expressed, shared, and celebrated. As she looked up at the transformed ship gleaming in the evening sky, Maya realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its intelligence or even its creativity alone. It was the uniquely human ability to embrace both chaos and order, to find beauty in imperfection, and to never stop reaching for the stars while keeping one foot firmly planted in the dirt of their home world. The story of humanity's first contact wasn't one of conquest or submission, but of transformation, proof that even the most rigid patterns could learn to dance, and that sometimes the most profound evolution comes not from seeking perfection, but from remembering how to play.